I've seen many things in this life. People who leave, promises forgotten, and hearts that give up far too soon. But I've also seen quiet miracles, like the unwavering loyalty of a dog who waited 15 years under a wind chime. This isn't just a story. It's a quiet echo of something many of us have lost: faith, patience, and the kind of love that doesn't ask questions. Welcome to Vale Marks, where stories carry meaning beyond words. Watch until the very end, because hidden in this simple tale is a powerful lesson that just might change how you see loyalty and yourself. In a quiet corner of a forgotten town, there stood a house that time had long since abandoned. Its paint was chipped, the wooden porch weathered and creaking, the windows smudged with the fingerprints of years gone by. Ivy curled up its sides like nature, trying to reclaim what man once built. Yet despite the stillness that wrapped around the house like a worn-out shawl, one thing remained in motion, always, faithfully, as if held in place by something deeper than habit. Every afternoon, just as the sun began its descent behind the hills, a dog would appear. An old one. Its fur, once likely thick and golden, now dulled with age and flecked with gray. Its back slightly arched, legs stiff with time. It walked slowly, carefully, and always to the same spot, beneath the porch's overhang where a small wind chime hung quietly from a rusted nail. The wind chime itself wasn't anything special. Just a few slim metal tubes, faded by sun and rain, swaying ever so gently with each passing breeze. But to the dog, it was everything. The people in the town had seen him for years. Some said 5, others said closer to 10. No one really knew. He had no collar, no name tag, no owner. But he belonged to that house as much as the cracked door and moss-covered roof did. Some thought he was just another stray who had wandered in and never left. Others whispered different stories. A few older folks swore that the dog had once lived there, that he was waiting for someone. But most people stopped asking questions. He wasn't a bother, never caused trouble. He didn't bark, didn't beg. He just waited. Children on bicycles sometimes passed by and slowed down, pointing toward the porch. Their parents would hush them gently, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. A few kind souls left bowls of food and water by the steps, and while the dog accepted them with a nod of gratitude in his eyes, it was clear those weren't the reason he stayed. No, he wasn't there for food. He was there for the wind, or rather for what came with it. Each afternoon, when the breeze picked up and rustled through the tall grass, the chime would sing, a soft, almost trembling melody. It was barely a sound at all, more a whisper than a song. Yet without fail, the dog would lift his head, ears twitching slightly, eyes fixated on the chime as if it held a secret he was waiting to hear. And then he would lie down, motionless, as if listening not just with his ears, but with every part of his being. There was something heartbreakingly human about the way he waited. He wasn't anxious. He didn't pace. He simply sat in silence, patient and calm, as if time had no hold on him anymore. It wasn't the kind of waiting you do when you expect something to happen right away. It was the kind of waiting that came from belief, an old, weathered kind of faith. Some days, the wind didn't come. On those days, the chime stayed still, and the dog's eyes would grow distant, clouded. He'd rest his chin on his paws and drift into sleep. But even then, his ears would flick at the slightest shift in the air, ready, always ready, for the song to begin again. There was a stillness in that porch that was more than silence. It was memory. Something lingered in the air, something heavier than dust or pine. It was as if the house itself was remembering alongside the dog, both bound by a moment that had long passed but refused to fade. The neighbors called him Lucky, though no one knew if that had ever been his real name. It felt ironic, maybe even a little cruel. What was Lucky about waiting for years in front of a house no one lived in? But somehow, The name stuck. Maybe because in some small, aching way, people wanted to believe he was lucky, that whoever he waited for would return one day. Still, deep down, most had given up hope. Seasons passed. Winters bit hard. Summers scorched. The dog grew slower, thinner. But he never left. His routine never changed. Same time, same spot, same solemn gaze at the chime. What held him there? Nobody knew. But there was something about that quiet persistence that stirred something in the hearts of those who passed by. A reminder, perhaps, that not all promises are broken. That even if the world forgets, some spirits remember. The wind, soft and warm, picked up again. The chime stirred. The dog lifted his head. And once more the porch became a place of waiting, quiet, hopeful, sacred. Years ago, long before the house had turned gray with dust and silence, it had been full of life. Back then, laughter spilled out of the windows, footsteps echoed through the hallway, and the porch wasn't just a porch, it was a place of magic. That was when Ben still lived there. Just a boy with scraped knees, dirt under his nails, and a heart bigger than the world. He found the dog on a rainy Thursday, huddled under a bench behind the town's little grocery store. The pup was tiny then, barely more than a ball of fur, shivering, soaked to the bone, eyes wide with fear. Ben didn't think twice. He took off his jacket, wrapped the trembling body in it, and ran all the way home in wet sneakers and a grin that split his face. His mother wasn't thrilled at first, but when she saw how gently Ben cradled the puppy, she relented with a sigh and a small smile. "He's your responsibility," she said, handing him an old towel. Ben nodded solemnly. "I know." He named him Buddy, and from that day on, they were inseparable. Buddy grew fast, all legs and ears, clumsy and joyful. He followed Ben everywhere, down the gravel path to school, to the creek where they skipped stones, to the backyard where they built a fort out of cardboard boxes. At night, they shared a bed, curled up under one blanket, Buddy snoring softly at Ben's feet. But the place they loved most was the porch. It was a simple wooden platform with peeling paint and a single wooden bench. Above it, Ben's mother had hung a wine chime, thin metal tubes that danced with the wind and sang a song so soft it almost sounded like a lullaby. Every evening, just before sunset, Ben and Buddy would sit there together. Sometimes Ben would talk about his day. Other times, they just listened, to the crickets, to the breeze, to the whispering chime. One evening, as they lay side by side, Buddy's head resting on Ben's leg, the wind chime began to sing. Ben turned to his furry friend and whispered with a mischievous grin, "Whenever you hear that chime, it means I'll be back soon. Okay, Buddy?" He laughed at how serious he made it sound, but Buddy simply looked up at him with eyes full of trust, as if he understood the weight of those words. Over time, it became their little ritual. Every time Ben left to go to school or run errands, he'd say the same thing. "Hear the chime? That means I'll come back." And every time he returned, Buddy would be there, waiting. It was a promise sealed not with words, but with time. Quiet, ordinary moments that somehow became sacred. But time has a cruel way of breaking the things we think are unshakable. It happened one night. The storm had rolled in fast, swallowing the horizon in dark clouds and pounding rain. Thunder cracked like bones splitting in the sky. Ben remembered huddling in his blanket, Buddy curled up against him, both of them startled by every rumble. But he wasn't afraid, not really. His parents were just out for groceries. They'd be home soon. Only they weren't. The car crash happened on the road just outside town. No one saw it coming. By the time the call came, it was too late. And before Ben could even grasp what was happening, a woman he barely knew, a relative from another state, arrived with a suitcase and tight lips. He remembered her words like distant thunder. "You'll come with me, sweetheart." We'll pack a few things quickly. It's best not to linger." He didn't get to say goodbye to the house. Not to the wind chime. Not to the backyard or the fort or the old swing set. And worst of all, not to Buddy. The woman didn't allow it. She said there was no time. Said dogs weren't allowed where she lived. Ben begged, pleaded, screamed even. But he was just a child and she was the adult who made the rules. They left that night. As the car pulled away, Ben twisted in his seat, straining to see the porch through the rain-streaked window. He thought, just maybe, he saw Buddy's silhouette standing there, ears perked, tail still, waiting, watching. Ben cried until he couldn't breathe. In the years that followed, everything changed. He grew older, moved schools, learned to stop asking about home. The wind chime faded into a shadow of a memory. Buddy became a name he whispered only in dreams. And the porch became something he wasn't sure had ever truly existed. But somewhere, deep inside, something remained. A small, quiet belief. That one day, when the wind blew just right and the chime sang again, a promise would come full circle. One made between a boy and a dog beneath an old wooden porch long before the world became so complicated. After that stormy night, the boy never came back. At first, Buddy didn't panic. He simply waited. The next morning, the porch was quiet. The front door never opened. No familiar footsteps. No scent of toast from the kitchen. No soft call of, "Buddy, breakfast," that usually came with Ben's sleepy voice. But Buddy waited anyway. He sat by the gate, tail flicking now and then, ears twitching at every car that passed on the gravel road. Every sound made him perk up, hope flaring in his chest, only to flicker out again like a candle in the wind. By noon, his water bowl was still empty. No one came out with fresh kibble in the red dish. Still, he waited. That night, he curled up on the welcome mat, head resting on his paws, eyes on the driveway. The next day, the same, and the next. After a while, the hunger crept in. Rain soaked his fur. Flies buzzed around, but he stayed. Eventually, some of the neighbors noticed. Mrs. Callahan from across the street walked over and poured a little water into his bowl. "Poor thing," she murmured. "I thought someone came to get you." But no one did. The news of the accident spread quietly through town, as these things often do. A few neighbors tried to coax Buddy into their yards. He wouldn't go. One man brought over fresh meat and called gently, "Come on, boy. Let's get you somewhere warm." Buddy sniffed the air, took the food, but retreated back to the porch. Always back to the porch. It became his place. The wind chime still hung above, its soft, delicate tones whispering through the air each afternoon. Every time it rang, Buddy's ears would lift, his head would turn. He would stare at the road, eyes fixed on the horizon. It was a ritual, for days, for weeks, for months, and then years. Season after season passed. The seasons painted the house in different moods. In the spring, wildflowers grew in cracks of the walkway. In the summer, the porch glowed gold under the sun. In the fall, leaves piled up around Buddy's feet, crackling softly when he moved. Winter, however, was always hardest. The cold bit deep into his joints, but still, he stayed. By the second year, most people assumed the boy was never coming back. Some believed he had died, like his parents. Others said he had moved far away and forgotten everything. But Buddy never questioned it, not in the way people do. He didn't ask why. He didn't demand answers. He simply waited. He stopped sitting by the gate after the first few months. Too many false hopes. Too many passing cars that weren't Ben. He found peace under the porch, just beside the wooden steps. That was where he could hear the wind chime best. That was where they used to sit together. Ben would talk, and Buddy would listen. Those moments lived there, tucked into the wood, the wind, the chime. He grew older. His once smooth coat thinned. Gray fur crept along his muzzle. His eyes clouded just a little, and his legs didn't work quite the way they used to. But still, every afternoon, he was there. He no longer barked at passing dogs or chased squirrels across the lawn. He didn't race to the road when footsteps echoed nearby. Instead, he listened. He listened for the chime, and when it rang, he would lift his head, slowly now, gaze fixed on the distance, with a quiet, desperate hope. For a moment, you could see it in his eyes. He remembered. He remembered the boy. He remembered the voice. He remembered the promise. Sometimes children would ride their bikes past the house and slow down, pointing at the dog on the porch. Some tossed him bits of sandwich crusts or said hello. He rarely moved. Unless, of course, the wind chime stirred. People in the neighborhood started calling him the Watcher, a silent guardian of a house no one lived in anymore. Some found it sweet. Others found it heartbreaking. But no one could bring themselves to stop him. He wasn't just any stray. He belonged there. That house, despite its cracked windows and peeling paint, still carried warmth. Not in its structure, but in its story. And Buddy was the last living piece of it. He became a part of the scenery, a fixture, the old dog beneath the chime. And although no one knew exactly why he stayed, there was something in the way he looked at that road, something in the stillness of his wait, that made people whisper and wonder. What is he waiting for? No one truly knew, but Buddy did. He remembered the boy with the scraped knees and the kind hands. He remembered the voice that said, "When you hear the chime, I'll be back." And that was enough. 15 years passed, and Buddy waited. Every afternoon, without fail. Not because someone told him to, not because he thought it made sense, but because his heart never stopped listening. The house, once painted pale blue, had faded into a dull gray. Vines crawled along its siding, and the steps leading to the porch creaked with every gust of wind. The shutters clung stubbornly to their hinges, some hanging crooked, others long gone. Windows gathered dust and cobwebs. No one had opened the door in over a decade. And yet, every afternoon, without fail, a shape would appear on the porch, curled into the same familiar spot beneath the overhang. It was Buddy. Time had not been kind to him. His gait had become slower, almost hesitant, as if every step needed thought. His joints ached, and the chill of winter crept deeper into his bones with each passing year. His muzzle was now a blend of silver and white, his once alert eyes cloudy and sunken. But his spirit, his reason for being, remained untouched. People marveled at it. How could a dog wait for so long? But they didn't understand. For Buddy, the wind chime was not a decoration. It wasn't something quaint or pretty, like the flowers that bloomed in the spring and vanished by summer. It was a heartbeat, a signal, the sound of memory, of promise, of everything he held on to when the world had tried to take it all away. Every time the wind stirred it, every time the delicate clink of metal reached his ears, he looked up, not always with the same energy, those days were long behind him, but with a quiet, patient longing. There was hope in the tilt of his head, even if it was subtle, even if no one else noticed. He was old, tired, but he waited. Because he remembered. The people of the town tried their best. More than once, someone attempted to bring him home, especially during storms or harsh winters. One family even built a small doghouse for him just across the street. It was sturdy, warm, complete with blankets and a bowl of food. But after spending one night there, Buddy hobbled back across the road at dawn and climbed back onto the porch. He never barked, never growled, never resisted. He just returned. Some began to think of it as loyalty. Others called it habit. But there was something more, something unexplainable, in the way he would lay beside the chime, listening. Not to the wind, not to the birds or rustling leaves, but to the past. And the chime never betrayed him. Even in stillness, when the air was heavy and unmoving, there would be one soft breeze at dusk, as if the universe remembered just in time. And with that breeze came the sound. Gentle, faint, but enough. Enough to make him lift his head. Enough to remind him Ben had promised. Over time, the porch and the dog became one, like a painting left untouched, like a photograph never moved. Tourists sometimes drove through town and snapped pictures. "That's the old waiting dog," they were told. "Been there for years." Some posted photos online. Some cried quietly behind their cameras. But the locals, those who passed him every day, had long accepted that Buddy was more than just a pet. He was a presence, a quiet soul that anchored something sacred to the town, something they couldn't quite name. He outlived many of the neighbors who first remembered Ben and his family. Children who once played nearby had grown up, moved away. The world changed. New buildings, faster cars, strangers passing through. But not Buddy, and not the chime. They were constant, weathered, silent witnesses to time's cruel march. There were days Buddy didn't rise at all. Days he lay there, still as stone, only his eyes following the shadows as they moved across the porch. Sometimes people thought the end had come, that he had finally closed his eyes for good. But the wind would blow, the chime would ring, and he would stir. Just slightly. A flick of the tail, a slow blink. He was still listening, still believing. It wasn't food that kept him alive. Neighbors brought meals, left bowls of fresh water, even treats. But Buddy didn't eat for pleasure. He ate because he had to stay. He endured cold, heat, illness, not out of instinct, but out of will, because he had a job, because he had a boy. The boy had said, "When you hear the chime, I'll be back." And that meant something. It meant everything. The town never tore the house down. Some thought about it, even floated the idea during council meetings. But every time it came up, someone would say, "But what about the dog?" And the discussion would quietly dissolve. It was as if the house, like Buddy, was protected by something intangible, a memory too important to disturb. So it stood, leaning, silent, still. And every afternoon, Buddy would settle beneath the porch, body curled tight, nose against the wooden floor, ears tilted toward the chime. His breaths were slower now, deeper, but with each one, he waited. The wind would come, the chime would ring, and he would look up, because some promises are never broken, even after 15 years. The house had been empty for so long that even the birds stopped landing on its roof. Nature had begun to claim it. Ivy curling through the cracks, squirrels nesting in the rafters, and wildflowers springing up from between the porch floorboards. It had become part of the background, like an old tree or forgotten signpost. Then, one spring afternoon, the stillness broke. A moving truck rolled up the road, tires crunching on gravel. A second car followed close behind. The screen door creaked open for the first time in years. New voices filled the air, laughter, footsteps, furniture being moved, a woman humming to herself, a man calling for help with a box, and among them a child's voice, bright, curious, full of energy. Her name was Lily. She was 8 years old with tangled curls, a tiny backpack shaped like a bunny, and eyes that noticed everything. The first time she saw the dog, she froze. He was lying in the shade under the porch, not more than a few feet from where her father had just placed a dusty rocking chair. His coat was patchy, and his head rested on his paws, but his eyes were open, watching. "Mom," Lily whispered, tugging her mother's sleeve. "There's a dog under our house." Her mother looked over, surprised. "Oh, honey, I think he's just an old stray. Probably wandered in a long time ago." "But he's not wandering," Lily said. "He's waiting." That night, after dinner, Lily asked if she could leave a piece of chicken outside. Her mother agreed, smiling at the small kindness. Lily placed the food gently at the edge of the porch, not too close, not too far. She didn't say anything, just sat on the steps and watched. The dog didn't move. Not that night, not the next morning either, but the chicken disappeared by sunrise. Over the next few days, a quiet rhythm formed between them. Lily would bring bits of her lunch outside, half an apple, a small piece of cheese, a crust of sandwich. She would sit nearby and talk softly about her day, how school was hard, how she missed her old friends, how her new room still smelled weird. She told him about the dream she had where she could fly, and the time she fell off her bike and scraped her knee, and how her goldfish, Bubbles, only lived for 5 days, and that felt like a very short friendship. At first, the dog didn't respond. He never barked or wagged his tail, but he didn't leave either. He listened, and for Lily, that was enough. It wasn't long before she named him. "Since you won't tell me your name," she said one morning, "I'm going to call you Grandpa Dog, because you look old, but also wise." She giggled, but the dog simply blinked. One windy afternoon, Lily sat with a peanut butter cracker in hand, watching the wind chime swing above her. It clinked softly, as it always did, whispering its delicate song into the breeze. She turned to the dog, who lay just a few feet away, his head tilted slightly toward the sound. "I think today might be the day," she said, with the seriousness only a child can muster. "I think someone's coming back." The dog looked at her, unmoving. "I don't know who," she continued, "but I can tell you're waiting. That's why you're here, right? You're waiting for somebody you love." The dog didn't answer, but something shifted. His eyes, once so dull, softened for a brief moment, as if her words had touched something long buried. From that day on, Lily made a ritual of it. Every time the wind blew and the chime rang, she'd smile and whisper, "I think it's today." And though the dog never made a sound, he began to sit a little closer to her, inch by inch, day by day, until one evening he allowed her to place her hand gently on his back. His fur was rough and thin, but warm. She didn't move. Neither did he. To Lily, he wasn't just a dog. He was a friend, a quiet, steadfast presence in a new and unfamiliar world. Someone who didn't rush her, didn't laugh at her questions, didn't ask for anything but time. And to Buddy, though Lily never knew his real name, she was more than just a curious child. She was the first soul in years who sat beside him without trying to change him. She didn't try to lead him away, didn't tug at his collar or whistle for him to follow. She simply accepted him, as he was. She didn't know his story, but she understood one truth instinctively, that he was waiting, and so she waited with him. Sometimes she'd lie on the porch beside him, arms crossed beneath her chin, both of them gazing at the road as if something, or someone, might come around the bend at any second. And when the chime sang above them, Lily would always say, "Hear that? I think that sound means good things are coming." The dog would blink slowly, head resting on his paws. Hope had returned to the porch, not loud or fast, but quietly, steadily, in the form of a little girl who believed in old souls and promises made long ago. The wind had changed that day. It wasn't the usual soft breeze that gently stirred the chime above the porch. It was stronger, persistent, the kind of wind that carried stories and stirred something ancient in the bones of the old house. The sky above was streaked with low clouds, but the sun still found its way through, casting long shadows across the yard. Lily sat on the porch, legs crossed, gently braiding blades of grass into a little bracelet. Buddy lay next to her, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed in a light doze. They'd spent the afternoon like this many times before, quiet, content, wrapped in the language of shared silence. But today felt different. The wind chime above them had already sung 3 times in the last hour. Its notes were clearer somehow, more insistent. Lily looked up at it, then over to Buddy. "Do you hear that?" she asked softly. It sounds like it's calling someone. Buddy didn't move, but his ears twitched. His nose lifted slightly, tasting something unfamiliar in the air. Down the long gravel road, a car approached. An older model, covered in dust from travel. It slowed as it reached the edge of the property, tires crunching to a stop beside the mailbox that hadn't seen a letter in years. A man stepped out. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a dark jacket and carrying something invisible in his posture, something heavy. He stood still for a long moment, as if the sight of the house had knocked the air from his lungs. His eyes moved slowly across the yard to the porch, to the wind chime that swayed above the steps, and then to the dog. Buddy had risen to his elbows. His eyes, cloudy with age, focused sharply on the figure by the gate. The wind carried the man's scent forward, faint, familiar. Something in it struck deep. A memory buried so far beneath years of waiting that it had almost faded. But not quite. Buddy's ears perked. His breathing quickened. The man stepped forward. 1 step, 2. He froze again, unable to speak, staring at the dog who hadn't moved more than a few yards in years. "Buddy," he whispered. The name cracked in his throat like a forgotten song. And that was all it took. Buddy surged to his feet, legs trembling with the effort. His body moved before his mind could catch up, as if something beyond him had taken over. He stumbled at first, his limbs rusty from age, but he kept going, toward the man, toward the scent, toward the voice. Then came the sound. The wind chime rang again, louder than before, a high, clear tone that echoed across the yard. It was as if the world itself had paused to listen. Buddy let out a sound, a half bark, half whimper, raw and broken, like a sob long held back. His tail wagged wildly, unsure whether to stand or fall. His eyes, once dull, burned bright with recognition. The man dropped to his knees. Tears spilled down his cheeks. "Buddy," he said again, louder this time, arms outstretched. I'm so sorry I left you. I didn't want to. I didn't know how." Buddy fell into him. Not gently, not cautiously, but like someone returning home after a lifetime of storms. They collapsed together onto the grass, the man wrapping his arms around the old dog as if trying to hold together all the years that had come undone. Buddy pressed his face into the man's chest, his body shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper, something breaking open and healing all at once. "I came back," the man whispered, his voice soaked in grief and wonder. "I promised you I would. I'm here now." Lily stood frozen on the porch, hands over her mouth, eyes wide. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She understood. Somehow she had always known that Buddy had been waiting for someone, now that someone had come. The wind chime rang again, once, twice. It sounded like joy. It sounded like forgiveness. It sounded like home. Buddy didn't move from the man's embrace. His breathing slowed, deepened. His eyes fluttered shut, but his ears stayed alert, as if he didn't want to miss a single word, a single second of this long-awaited reunion. And the man, Ben, held him tighter. The world around them faded. The cracked paint, the broken fence, the years of silence, they all fell away. All that remained was this: a boy who had become a man, a dog who had never stopped believing, and a promise that had finally been kept. 15 years apart. One moment to make it whole again. The wind blew gently across the porch. The chime sang its soft, shimmering song. And the boy, now grown, whispered once more, "I'm home." Ben stayed. It wasn't a dramatic decision. There were no grand speeches, no long debates. It just made sense. After all these years, after everything, the house had waited, the dog had waited, and so had a part of Ben himself. And now, finally, all three had found their way back to one another. He started slowly. The first morning after their reunion, he swept the porch. The next day, he cleaned out the front room. By the end of the week, he'd patched the broken windows, scrubbed the floors, and fixed the screen door that had always creaked since he was a child. It still creaked afterward, but now it sounded more like a welcome than a warning. The town watched with quiet wonder. Some were surprised, others weren't. They'd seen the look in Ben's eyes when he embraced Buddy, the kind of look you don't walk away from. Buddy, for his part, changed too, not in the way of becoming younger or stronger. Time had left its marks. But there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. A peace. A soft light that returned with each passing day. He no longer slept with one eye open. He no longer startled at distant footsteps or turned his head at every gust of wind. He slept deeply now, warm, safe, tucked against Ben's side each night on a blanket near the fireplace. And Lily still came. Every day after school, she'd skip up the path, her backpack bouncing, her face bright with curiosity and joy. She never needed an invitation. Ben always greeted her with a smile, and Buddy, though slower, wagged his tail whenever she arrived. Sometimes she brought stories, sometimes she brought cookies, but she always brought presents. To her, the house was no longer the spooky place where the old dog lived. It had become a sanctuary, a home, a reminder that even the quietest things can hold the biggest hearts. One afternoon, as the sun spilled golden light across the porch, Lily lay on her stomach beside Buddy, petting his fur gently. "Did you ever think he'd come back?" she asked him, as if still testing the line between magic and miracle. Buddy didn't answer, of course. But Ben, who had been listening from the steps, replied, "I think he always believed I would." Lily smiled. The wind picked up. The chime rang, soft and sweet, no longer a call into silence but a song of reunion. It no longer carried loneliness. It carried joy. The wind chime had become something else entirely. It wasn't just a memory now, it was a symbol of something fulfilled. It rang not because someone was missing, but because someone had returned. A promise, once whispered by a boy to his dog, had been kept. Ben took down the rusted hook and replaced it with a fresh one. He polished the old chime and rewound the string with care. When he hung it back up, it sparkled in the sun, still the same, yet somehow new. The house, like the lives inside it, had found its rhythm again. Each morning began with quiet routines. Ben would make coffee. Buddy would rise slowly, stretch, and lie in his favorite sunspot near the front window. Lily would arrive after lunch, always with something to say or something to draw. She had started sketching Buddy now, piles of drawings filled with floppy ears and sleepy eyes. In every one, she made sure to draw the wind chime just above him, always ringing, always watching. One day, as she taped another picture to the refrigerator, she asked, "Do you think Buddy knows he kept his promise?" Ben looked at her surprised. "You mean my promise?" Lily shook her head. I mean his." He waited. "That's a promise too, isn't it?" Ben didn't answer right away. He looked down at Buddy, who was snoring gently on the rug, one paw twitching in a dream. He thought of all the seasons that had passed without him, all the quiet days, all the lonely nights, all the times the wind had called and the dog had answered, silently, faithfully. "Yes," Ben said softly. "It is." The wind blew again. The chime rang. And in that simple moment, past and present met like old friends. It wasn't about making up for lost time anymore. It was about honoring the time that had never been lost, time held by loyalty, preserved by love. And for Lily, who had watched this all unfold, who had sat beside the dog before she knew his name or story, it was a lesson she'd carry forever. To her, Buddy wasn't just a dog. He was living proof that love doesn't forget, that loyalty doesn't expire, that sometimes the smallest promises, spoken quietly on a childhood porch, can shape lifetimes. And so, every afternoon, the chime continued to sing. Not a song of waiting, but of return, of home, of hope fulfilled, and beneath it, always, a boy and his dog together again. 15 years ago, on a winter night cloaked in snow, little Ben lost both his parents in a tragic car accident. He didn't fully understand what was happening, only that when he woke up, he was in the back seat of a strange car, his knees scraped, his eyes swollen from crying. A woman he didn't know, his Aunt Helen, told him in a firm voice, "You'll live with me now. It's best you forget everything." Ben had no choice. The house where he once lived, where laughter echoed and golden afternoons unfolded beside a small four-legged friend, became nothing more than a fading name. That little dog. He remembered the name but never dared speak it aloud. Every time he tried, Aunt Helen would go silent and change the subject. "Dogs can be replaced," she said once. "What you need is a future, not a past." So Ben grew up in silence. No photos, no letters, no mention of home. The real one, with the wind chime hanging by the porch and its soft song that soothed him to sleep like a mother's hand. But memories don't vanish. They simply lie dormant. At 24, Ben lived an orderly life, not lacking, but never quite whole. He worked as an accountant, rented a small apartment, dated a few women, but never stayed long. He couldn't explain the emptiness that followed him like a shadow, as if a piece of his soul had been torn away long ago. One ordinary afternoon, while walking through an old part of town, he paused in front of a vintage store. Hanging in the window was a wind chime, simple, unremarkable to most. But to Ben, it was everything. That sound, soft and familiar, rang just as he looked at it, not from the breeze he felt, but from something deeper. In an instant, the dam broke. A wall of memory flooded in. He saw himself as a child, sitting under the porch with a chubby little dog resting its head on his lap, and his mother smiling as she said, "Whenever the chime rings, remember, home is waiting for you." That night, Ben couldn't sleep. The memories raged like a storm, unrelenting. He remembered the morning licks on his cheek, the joyful barking when he came home from school, the two of them hiding under the dining table when his dad scolded him for spilling milk. And he remembered, painfully, the last glance from the dog as the car door closed, pulling Ben away forever. He couldn't stay silent anymore. The next day, Ben packed a small bag, requested time off work, and began a journey back to the countryside of his childhood. He had no address, just a town's name and blurry images in his mind. He stopped at every crossroad, asking elderly locals if they remembered a boy, a house, a wind chime. One old woman finally said, "You mean the house with the chime?" Still standing, though no one lives there. But there's a dog that never really left. Ben's heart skipped. As he approached the house near sunset, a gentle wind stirred. The chime, old and weathered, swayed lightly from the porch. And there, beneath it, sat a dog. Thinner now with a grayed muzzle and a slight curve in its spine, but those eyes were still the same. The chime rang again. The dog turned. Ben whispered, his voice cracking, "Buddy!" Time stopped. The dog rose, unsteady but determined, and limped toward him. Ben dropped to his knees, arms open, and they collided in a blur of fur and tears. He buried his face into the dog's coat, sobbing like the boy he once was. "I came back. I'm so sorry. I let you wait too long." Above them, the wind chime sang once more. Not the tune of loneliness, but a song of reunion. They say, "What is meant for you will find its way back." And perhaps that's the very heart of this story. On this porch, under the song of a wind chime, a dog didn't just wait, he believed. And in doing so, He taught us all what it means to love without conditions and to wait without losing hope. If this story touched you even just a little, please consider leaving a comment, sharing your thoughts, and subscribing to Vale Marks. Your support brings life to stories that matter. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue creating meaningful, heartfelt content. The world may forget what you say, but it will never forget how you made them feel. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for more stories that stay with you.